Today on CityCast Denver. In a year when our state is facing a massive budget deficit, our governor, Jared Polis, is reportedly very excited about the prospect of putting up $34 million in tax incentives to lure the Sundance Film Festival to Boulder. Movie lovers across the Front Range are divided about what that would mean for us. So I called up Ali Vallarta, the host of CityCast Salt Lake and a former Sundance insider, to give us the real story. Today is Thursday, January 16th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Hey, before we get started, I want to talk to you about Heyday. It's an indoor fair with urban flair, and you're invited. We're going to have all the carnival classics, but with a Denver twist. From a whole day of live performances on the grandstand stage to tarot readings and plenty of CityCast goodies to give away. So get your tickets now at heydaydenver.com. That's heydaydenver.com. All right, let's get to the show. Ali Vallarta, host of CityCast Salt Lake. Welcome back to CityCast Denver.
It's so good to be here with you, Bree. You're the coolest. It's fun to drop in.
I was just telling you, I love talking to you. It's not often you get to talk to someone that does the exact same job you do somewhere else.
Completely. So. Just over here in your nemesis city.
Well, you're kind of an expert on something that we are kind of dipping our toes in here in Colorado. And so we're talking about the Sundance Film Festival. This is a prestigious independent film festival, but you know this festival in a different way. What does Sundance mean to you?
Yeah, so I actually moved to Utah to work for the Sundance Film Festival, which is not an uncommon story here in Salt Lake City. The festival hires a lot of people locally, especially seasonal workers, to operate the, actual nuts and bolts of the festival itself. And my plan was to live in Salt Lake City for 18 weeks and work for Sundance. And now it's 9 years later and I'm hosting a daily news podcast about the city. So here we are. But I mean, I love this festival. I love film festivals in general. I started working at a film festival when I was 13 years old, and it launched a whole career for me in media and movies and all the things. So it's been really heartbreaking over the past few years to just see how much festivals, not just Sundance, which we'll get into, but festivals on the whole have struggled to kind of stick around with the same old business plan.
So the reason that we're talking about it at all is because there's this conversation happening about the festival itself leaving Park City, Utah. And here Boulder, Colorado is one of the finalists to be the new host city. Can you get into some of the specifics of why this move is happening?
Yeah. So I think, if you'll have me, I'd love to give you just a sense of kind of how we got here, because I think it matters.
Please.
So Sundance originally started in Salt Lake City. And as the story goes, it was the very famous director Sidney Pollack's idea to move the festival up to Park City. And it's something that Robert Redford liked the idea of, because there's this great quote he gave the Salt Lake Tribune that was like, let's make the atmosphere a little rougher, because that's what independent film is. And we want to make people really work for it to see these movies. And that's an incredible sort of metaphor for how the indie movie industry has been operating and forced to operate for decades. And if you don't know who Robert Redford is, he's basically was the iconic hot actor guy of the second half of the 21st or 20th century. This is his festival. This is his baby. And I think it's also important to remember that, in its heyday, Sundance wasn't just glitzy, glammy, kind of bringing celebrities into town. It was a marketplace, Brie. So, if a movie was premiering in Park City at the Sundance Film Festival, nobody had seen a screener before. Nobody had been emailed a link. It was truly lights dim, and everyone who's anyone in the film industry is about to see this thing for the first time. There are stories of executives sneaking out of the theater before the credits on their phones to start bidding wars for movies in the middle of the night, right? That is cool. I get chills just thinking about it. And so, but the truth is that the industry has shifted a lot, right? You've got Netflix premiering movies at Sundance now that are going to be on Netflix, 6 or 8 weeks after the festival, where you can watch it for free instead of buying a $35 ticket to see that movie, if you can even get into that screening. So fast way forward to 2020, okay? It's January of 2020. I know we don't want to be in that place, but I'm going to take us there just for a second. Taylor Swift, arguably the most famous person in the world, is opening her documentary, Miss Americana, at the Sundance Film Festival. And just like a month later, we are going to start to realize that that was a super spreader event here in Park City. And the pandemic is going to lay to bear a lot of the issues that have been bubbling up, not just at this festival, but in this industry for a while now. And I think one of those issues was sort of some dysfunction in leadership. Like their executive director, who had been in the role for 2 years of the festival, of the institute, the whole institute, was on a podcast called The Town, which is kind of an insidery show about Hollywood. And the title of the episode was, Can Sundance Save Indie Film? And she's talking about, all the promise of the festival and some of the struggles with being in Park City. And it feels like a little bit of foreshadowing. And 2 months later, she resigns and sends a letter to the board citing declining revenue. There was criticism that she was an ineffective fundraiser. And I think since then, this festival has been in a little bit of a leadership vacuum. They've still only have an interim CEO. And they're also in a bit of like a vision vacuum. So I know that you want me to say that like Sundance coming to Boulder is necessarily could be like the coolest thing ever. But I think this festival has some real struggles. And my mom used to say, wherever you go, there you are.
I think that's helpful context, though, because like you're saying, the pandemic, again, disrupted so many industries and so many things. I'm from the music world, and South by Southwest is something similar in this space, where it started out as something very, very, very underground and then grew into the like Katy Perry on the Doritos stage kind of thing, right? But what the pandemic did, it sounds like with Sundance, was sort of peel back something that was already happening, which was some dysfunction, like you said, lack of vision or leadership. But it is interesting that the prestige of the festival is still so attractive. This brand is still so attractive that our state is willing to pony up millions of dollars to attract your dysfunctional film festival. But let's maybe get into that a little bit, because you are from this world. Then film festivals are a circuit. They happen all over the country all year round. So we have two big ones here. We have the Boulder Film Festival and the Denver Film Festival. These both have been happening for decades. And
you have Telluride, which is in the state, though not nearby, but really prestigious.
Yes. And then we have a horror festival. It's really coming up here, but it has been here for decades. And these two festivals in particular, I think the things I'm hearing from my friends on the inside is there's some nervousness, right? There's hope that if Sundance comes here, that these three festivals would work together. But I think my friends in the film world are saying, well, isn't it going to be hard to have three film festivals supported? Wouldn't just like, is Sundance, I guess my question for you is would Sundance be a good partner for these festivals? Like, is there a track record to show that this could be beneficial to those festivals here in Colorado that already exist?
That's an interesting question. I mean, one of the complaints from Utah locals about Sundance is that the community programming could be a lot more robust. Now, we do get access to free screenings during the festival. I think some of their best community programming is in the summer, when they'll show, festival favorites as like lawn movies. It's a blast. If you go to the Sundance community landing page, if you go to their website, what you're going to find is actually not a litany of events that Sundance is hosting, but local kind of goings-on that their partners are hosting. So I do think they're a good partner in terms of amplifying other nonprofits. They tend to use, like for us here, our Salt Lake Film Society is a venue during the festival here in Salt Lake City. Though the festival's in Park City, there's a piece of it that happens here in Salt Lake. And Salt Lake's current bid for the festival, which I should say, like Salt Lake City's also bidding for this festival.
Fair, yes.
Would flip that. It would be like majority of the festival in Salt Lake, piece of it in Park City, which is the reverse of what it is now. But like our film society, our local indie theater is a host, is a venue, and that's a great thing for them because it also just brings a lot of foot traffic into that venue, and people remember that it's a really cute theater and it's like a great place to go. And so maybe then the rest of the winter when they want to see a movie, that's the choice they'll make over, the luxury seating at like a Megaplex or a Cinemark.
Yeah.
That said, there is a really popular expression in the arts world that I'm sure you've heard, Bree, from music industry, which is exposure doesn't pay the bills.
Yes.
And I think that's true. And I also think that's like kind of at the core of the issue that Sundance is having right now with revenue. Like if you're a talent agency and you launch a celebrity or launch a filmmaker, you get a portion of their earnings. That's the business plan. If you're Sundance and you screen A Real Pain and A Real Pain wins an Oscar this year, how financially does that benefit the festival, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, the cost of this festival is pretty high. So, like, I don't know what it costs to go see a movie at, the Denver Film Festival or the Boulder Film Festival. They might actually retain an advantage in pricing. The locals ticket package for 10 tickets at Sundance right now is $675.
For how many screenings?
10 movies, 10 movie tickets. That's a $67 movie ticket. Now, Sundance would say, well, the advantage of the ticket package is that you get first pick at movies. You can buy an individual ticket for $35 if you want, but then you're going to kind of get the dregs.
Yeah.
And
this is like
if you want to see
experience.
If you want to see A Real Pain of this year's Sundance, what's hot, what everyone's talking about, you're probably going to have a tough time getting a ticket by the end of, the ticket sales. So it's hard for me to say because I also think like Sundance is really exploring change, and I think that's a good thing. I think this whole like process of thinking about moving somewhere else is the festival seems to be taking the opportunity to also rethink like some of its model and its vision and like what could it look like. So it might be dependent on what kind of proposal Boulder brings in terms of how they might work with other festivals. But for sure, they're probably the biggest name in the United States, and they're going to cast a shadow. Yeah,
inevitably. Yeah, I think that's a big concern here for the film world, and even just the competition itself to get the movies. Like, why would you screen something at Boulder if Sundance already has it? It's a competition thing as well. But that when you are talking about the individual or the ticket prices for the community, for the average person that wants to go, I can see where that price tag makes it inaccessible, and therefore you don't feel connected to it. It doesn't feel like something that's for you in your own city.
Yeah. And inaccessibility isn't just a problem of pricing. I think it's also, to go back to Robert Redford thinking that making it difficult to get to Park City was sort of like part of the strategy. Then now making the festival more accessible needs to be part of the strategy. Yeah. And if you look at something like the Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF, which as Sundance has sort of like struggled, I think TIFF has had a bit of a meteoric rise. And part of that is like just being in a big city. It's so much easier. It's easier to fly people in, to house them, to put them in hotels, to transport them around, to get people to your venues. Like, you don't have a parking crisis. So
the venues are equipped for this kind of thing to begin with.
Yeah.
So I want to get into a little bit of the politics because, like you said, it's not that Utah is out of this game. There, you all are still very much vying for this festival. Our governor, Jared Polis, is very excited about luring Sundance. He's also a Boulder boy. He's from Boulder. Okay. So, and our lawmakers here are talking about offering as much as $34 million in tax incentives, which is quite a bit more maybe than Utah or Cincinnati, which is the other contender here. I wonder, what is your sense of the politics for the selection process right now? What do you think they're thinking about?
Yeah, I think money is definitely a piece. Though, to be clear, like we've heard so little from Sundance about exactly what is in their rubric. There's been a lot of platitudes about how this is like an exciting opportunity and, the contract with Park City is up. And so let's take this time to really rethink the future. And I think that's smart. But we don't know exactly what is and isn't a factor. I have to imagine, given that talk about the festival's declining revenue has been a main thing the past few years, that money is going to play a piece. $34 million in tax credits is a lot of money. Right now, as I understand it, the Utah proposal is around $6 million with some corporate sponsorship. The proposal from Cincinnati is about $5 million. One of the reasons, I should say, that Sundance got a little stalled up with Park City in their contract renewal is because they were frustrated. They wanted an arts and culture district. That's something that the festival's been or the Institute has been kind of working on getting, so that they could have, permanent offices, like just more resources in town. And that was supposed to be about a $90 million, like at least partially taxpayer funded project. And the city wasn't very hot for it. Like, that's a pretty big price tag even to Park City for that. So definitely, like, they would like some funding support. Yeah. In terms of politics, I think that, and this is me sort of like, I don't know, this is just my impression. But, I got a press release from Sundance earlier this year that they were announcing all of the fellows for a trans filmmaking program that they've launched. Now, this state that I'm in, Utah, is a state where if you're trans, you can't use certain public restrooms, right, that align with your gender identity. So if I were leading the Sundance Film Festival, I think I'd be thinking pretty hard about the politics of our home state and whether or not it was quite literally a safe place for the filmmakers that we're flying into town from all over the world and country, and what that future looks like. So that, I feel like, does give Colorado a bit of a competitive advantage in this whole conversation if politics are on the table in these kind of closed-door discussions.
What do you see around Sundance when it comes to economic impact? Because, like, outside of the festival itself, there's always these PR pushes like, this is going to bring this many people to the city, so this many people are going to be eating at restaurants and staying at hotels. And you know what I mean? Is that something that you feel like folks in Utah can feel the impact of in a good way when it comes to something like Sundance?
Yeah, it's always so hard to get, I feel like, a true sense of that. So we've seen this number, $118 million contribution to Utah's gross domestic product from Sundance. And they brag about creating 1,600 jobs for Utah residents between, the actual festival, hiring staff and seasonal staff, and the bartenders and the party event planners and taxi drivers and
I was going to say the people
else.
that move the talent from the festival to the hotel. I mean, There's a lot of people involved.
The ecosystem of Sundance, I think, is the economic impact of the ecosystem of the festival is even bigger than I think the festival itself. And that is pretty significant, especially in Park City. There are places on Park City's Main Street that rent out their restaurants for sickening amounts of money during this festival because they know that, Park City's Main Street becomes sort of the epicenter of the festival. And one of the coolest things about it is that it creates like a festival village. And I will say that's my favorite part of the festival because I think some of the sponsor activations end up being some of the more accessible things, like cool giveaways and free hot chocolate and whatever. But every little restaurant or shop along Main Street in Park City can rent itself out to Chase or Delta or whatever for hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking big profit from just being a property owner in Park City.
And you can go to the Chase Movie Lounge after hours party featuring DJ so and so with drinks by White Claw, blah blah blah. And
but only if you have the Chase Sapphire Reserve card.
Right. No, but I agree that the economic impact is those numbers get thrown around too when it comes to the arts in general. And it's always hard to quantify when you look at the actual impact on the people, maybe the artists themselves. Or here, I think that's a great example, though, of how it could be positive for these businesses that are along this strip.
The only thing I would say is it does feel to me as an outsider on this process right now, but someone who's pretty closely observing it, if I were a city and I was thinking about investing in Sundance, I'd want to see the business plan. And it feels like Sundance is asking cities for a business plan right now. And I'm curious how much cities are asking Sundance for one in return.
No, that's a fair question. That's a fair question. My last question is sort of just bigger picture, or more philosophical. But I just wonder, Ali, what are your thoughts on potentially losing something that maybe feels like it defines Utah in a certain sense?
I feel like there's part of me that's kind of come to terms with it. But I also will say, I think Utah has a really good shot at retaining this festival. You know, contract negotiations and renewals are often an opportunity for everyone to come back to the table and ask for what they want. And I think the festival is asking for what it wants. And the state of Utah is asking for what it wants. Salt Lake City is saying this festival belongs here. We can help solve some of your problems if you bring it down the mountain and make it more accessible. Arts organizations have had a terrible past decade, I would say, in terms of fundraising. Like, arts philanthropy has seen the largest decrease in the past few years of any philanthropic sector. And I'm always rooting for a big idea. I'm always rooting for a vision. And I think that's one of the things that I found so cool about Sundance when I moved here years ago to work for them, is that I felt like there was this really clear vision of what the festival could do and was doing. And right now, I think it's lost its mojo a little bit in terms of vision and leadership. And more than anything, I do want it to succeed. I want people who attend the festival to have the best possible experience. And I want independent films to continue to be platformed and go on and win Oscars. So where that ends up being, I think, is maybe less important to me than that it happens at all, as someone who just loves to go to the movies. And if it premieres at Sundance in Cleveland or Boulder and I go see it at the Film Society here, that's fine.
But I do have to say, you mentioned that you think that it still has a good chance of staying in Utah. Do you think Boulder's just getting used as leverage to say, like, up your game?
You know, that's the art of the deal, isn't it, Bree?
Yeah, that's true.
These are the times we're living in, man. Everything's a deal that's being made behind our backs that we might end up paying for. It feels like the dark truth of the year we're about to have.
Well, Ali Vallarta, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell Robert Redford about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. And again, if you love this show, come see us in person at Heyday, an indoor fair with urban flair, on Saturday, March 8th. Get your tickets now at heydaydenver.com. And we'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later. What'd she say? They trot him out in his leather jacket. They roll him out. Hey, let's roll out Robert Redford, or the hologram of Robert Redford.